Welcome back, and welcome to the new method instruction for this session. This session focuses on direct inquiry. This is a method that has become increasingly popular over the last 15 to 20 years because of its effectiveness. It seems to be especially well suited to Westerners because it is very intellectual and mind-based. Essentially, it uses the narrative self-based mind to question itself. This session is going to be a bit different than most of the others because it will come in two batches of instructions. The first part will be delivered today, and the second part will be available a bit later. During today's instruction, we're going to cover the core of the method, and the core is actually very simple. It just involves literally and directly questioning who and what you are. Questions like this are asked mentally, so they're asked silently to yourself inside your own mind. So this session, we're going to be moving beyond the purely awareness-based emphasis of prior weeks, and we're bringing the mind back into the equation a little bit. At the most basic level, this method literally involves you asking and answering one or both of the following two questions, whichever works best for you. Who am I and what am I? You want to really dig into these questions to the greatest extent that you possibly can. You'll find that when you do, you'll be both digging into your concepts involving who you are and also, as you keep asking, into your moment-to-moment direct experience of it as well. What you're looking for is an answer that seems to bring with it an absolute certainty that you really can't falsify in any way. Now, it's possible that that certainty may be an absolute uncertainty. It's a bit of a paradox, but it won't necessarily be an answer that you get to in words. We'll see more on that in just a little bit. Let's start by having you get a sense of what it's like to ask one of these questions and answer it. So in a few moments, I'll ask you to pause the video and simply ask either who am I or what am I, and answer it. Whatever answer occurs to you, I'd like you to try to determine if it's ultimately true. Is it the ultimate answer for who you truly are? Now, there are a couple of ways to determine this. Perhaps the easiest is to question your answer directly by inquiring about it and asking things like, well, let's see. I said, who am I? And I answered, I am a programmer. Would I still exist if that wasn't true? If I wasn't a programmer, would I still exist? And in all likelihood, you would, right? So there's all sorts of different questions that you can ask along these lines. Would I still exist if this wasn't true? Would I still exist if this went away? Would I still exist if this didn't exist? You can see that there's lots of different angles on this, and you may need to use, one or the other angle that is more appropriate to whatever answer you came up with to the question of who am I or what am I. And of course, you can think of many more angles that are similar to that. You're basically just trying to sort of poke holes in your answer. Now, if after doing that, the answer is that you would still exist, you have not found your ultimate answer yet. So if you stopped being a programmer and you determined that at that point you would still probably exist, well, time to keep digging. Okay, if I'm not just a programmer, then who am I? Well, let's see. I'm a father. Well, if you stopped being a father, would you still exist? Okay, yes, I would. I'm a, and so on and so forth, and you wind your way down. Now, those are very surfacey answers. It's not going to take you very long to get beyond those, but you will probably start at the surface like that, and then you'll wind your way down, and eventually hit something like, I'm a human. Okay, that's a tougher question to answer, right? When you're trying to falsify it. would you still exist if you weren't a human? Well, another way to carefully inspect and analyze your answer is to ask yourself if you're 100% certain that it's true. You could also ask yourself if other things might be true. For example, you could ask yourself if the opposite of your answer might be true. So, if you weren't a human anymore, would you still exist? What would you say to that? It might relate to some of your belief systems or whatever else. You might have to go inside and really sort of feel that out. But you could also have alternate views of that, right? So you get the idea. You're going to get a lot more on this. I just want you to dip your toe in the water a little bit. I just want you to get started on this and get a little bit of experience before we move on. Again, if it seems that other things might also be true, then you most likely haven't found your ultimate answer yet. And if you haven't found your ultimate answer, I'd like you to ask the first question again, whichever it was. Who am I? What am I? Just like you saw me do a minute ago, and repeat the process. When you get to a point where you have an ultimate answer, I'd like you to just pay attention to where you're at internally and experientially at that moment, and just sit with it for a bit. Really try to sink into it. Okay, so I'm a programmer and I wouldn't exist if I wasn't a programmer. I'm going to go into maximal programmerness. I'm going to sit with that. When you're doing that, does it feel like you've reached the ultimate answer to who you are? If you just sit there in your ultimate programmerness and think, if this programmerness went away, I wouldn't exist. Does that hold true for you as you're sinking into it? There should be a strong, unshakable experiential component to that answer. It's also possible that as you're sinking in, you might realize, wait a minute, maybe I would still exist if I wasn't a programmer, right? So you can go a little bit deeper. Maybe another answer comes up that seems like a new and better answer to the question. If that happens, I'd like you to start the questioning process again until you reach what you think is the ultimate answer again, and then sink into that experientially. When you've been sinking into a place that seems to be as deep as you can get, then unpause the video and we'll continue. But for now, pause the video and just do this exercise. Welcome back, and welcome to what may very well have been your first experience of direct inquiry. You've just experienced the very heart of this method. It simply involves digging and digging and digging with the mind for the answer to one of these two questions until you reach a point where you are 100% certain of your response and you can't falsify it no matter what you try. Really, you need to keep digging even after you reach the point where you feel like you've done everything possible to try to get beyond whatever your current answer is. You cannot stop there. You need to keep going, keep pushing, keep challenging that answer. You'll learn much more about this, but for now, please just set the experience you had a moment ago aside. I just wanted you to have some sense of what it would be like as you move forward through this session's content. This is one of the most successful methods out there. Even if you're in fundamental well-being, this can be a highly effective exercise in taking you further. At the most basic level, it simply involves what you just experienced, using your mind to increasingly dig down and analyze who and what you are. However, as with every other method, it's important to note that some of you will be aligned with this and some of you won't. This method can be very frustrating, even for people who are aligned with it. As we'll see, you're essentially using it to ask the mind to solve a problem that actually it never can, in hopes of getting the mind to just let go so that you can get beyond it. So, frustration alone is not a good measure for this session of whether or not this method is working for you. If you're now a finder, you'll want to be very sensitive regarding whether this method is starting to weaken your sense of fundamental well-being. Because this is an in-the-mind method. So this is a method that is really in there stirring up mental stuff. And it can definitely reduce fundamental well-being, even pull people out of fundamental well-being who are finders and who are not aligned with this method. Do not risk it. If you think that this is the case for you, just substitute whatever method has been working best for you before this session, during the rest of the session, after you start to suspect that you may have a problem with this particular method. These are very powerful methods that we're using in the second half of the program. And if they're not aligned with you, they can absolutely pull you out of fundamental well-being. We have had that happen on numerous occasions in the course. On the other hand, if direct inquiry is aligned with you and you're in fundamental well-being at this point, it can be hugely beneficial in helping you stabilize and deepen your experience of fundamental well-being. So it's not something to dismiss out of hand just because you're a finder. You definitely want to see which might be true for you. Now, if you're not yet in fundamental well-being, the best advice is to give this method all that you've got and see where it takes you during this session, just as you would do with any other method. If you notice adverse changes in your life this week, it's most likely not in line with you. But again, do not base it on the experience with the practice itself. The practice might be very frustrating for you, but still working wonderfully. As always, the evidence to pay attention to is in what you see in your life outside of your practice. Direct inquiry is a method that requires a great deal of effort. You really have to push yourself to get the most out of it. It's an iterative process and it can take a lot of time. For this reason, we're not requiring any other meditation exercise during this session. You'll need all the time that you can get for this practice. The more time you can put in, the more you're going to get out of it. This is one of those methods that can absolutely transition you to fundamental well-being the very first time you use it. This happened for the first participant who volunteered to have it done for her in the very first Finders course, as you'll hear a bit more about later. So you should take every single session you do involving it very seriously, because it is literally that effective. One of the most difficult things to understand about direct inquiry is what you're trying to reach. So before we go on, I'd like you to hear a little from a man named John Wheeler. He's one of the most highly regarded people in Western forms of direct inquiry. This discussion from John about what you're trying to realize in this whole process is absolutely wonderful. John really succinctly sums it up in a very powerful way during this video clip that you're about to watch. It's only about 15 minutes, and it's excerpted from a larger YouTube video that's linked to from this page. Okay, let's go ahead and watch this clip of John now.
I think in the beginning, you might hear a few pointers to essentially get you looking in the right direction. And, you'll hear many different types of pointers. And, if I start to talk about it or share, my experience or my understanding, I'll come out with a certain set of pointers and concepts that is how I would frame what, is the essence of what Bob is pointing to. And I always often come back to the basic pointer that you hear quite a lot, that there is this nature of reality or truth that is accessible to us, and if we are curious to where that resides or how we would look at that or where we would find that, we also often hear something to the effect of that is what you are, or that's already what you are. So this natural state or reality gets pointed to, but in a practical way, when you want to notice that or recognize that as an actual direct recognition, where you look for that, where you access that, is pointed to be precisely exactly where you are, because your natural being or natural state is that reality that's being talked about. So that's a way of using pointers and some words and concepts to try to get us simply to look in the right direction and notice something in our experience. Now, once we have a grasp of that or basic sense of that, then the concepts and the pointers can fall away, and we're just in an immediate recognition of something that's not a concept, that is present in our experience. And that's really more what this is about. Not so much what the concept or the word is, or how it's stated, or who says it, or anything like that. It's actually something that is being pointed to. So I think it's important to keep that in mind with any of these types of teachings and pointers. And so so we can go immediately into noticing what is the nature of what is present in our experience here right now, that isn't framed by any concept. And there's clearly something here. Each one of us is present, existing, aware, and alive, conscious, and whatever that is, whatever that reality is, that if you notice that, you'll see that that's not a word or an object or a pointer. It's not even a teaching, and there's really no particular teaching or school of thought that really can capture that or own that, or kind of have the rights to that, so to speak. But still, that natural being and knowing essence of what we are is actually present for all of us, even right now in this moment. And I think what we find is that at the end of the day, as we're looking at this, resonating with it, that's what you recognize at the end in terms of where the pointers are pointing to. So I would say just to encourage you to pause the concept, pause the question, pause the mind trying to grasp some particular understanding, and just simply relax and notice something very simple and available, which can be pointed to. So I could call it the fact of your being, or that innate conscious presence that's here right now, that's at the root of all of our natural functioning and seeing and knowing and thinking. And it's there prior to any description, word, or label. And once you get that, once you resonate with that and realize that that's what we can notice, that's what's really being pointed to, it just goes to an immediate recognition, an immediate looking and seeing that indirect experience. And it's quite interesting, because what you will find is that a lot of those pointers that are used turn out to be someone attempting to describe what your natural being is. So just to give a flavor of a few things that I would say, and encourage you also to just notice right now that there is that effortless, natural, given reality of your being here right now. And that's not an attainment, and it's not even an awakening. It's not a liberation or some kind of spiritual state. It's actually simpler and prior to that. And in looking at that and recognizing what that is, you find that it's not troubled by questions and problems. It's not divided from anything. It's not searching for anything. It's not limited or defective or anything like that. So the amazing thing about this is when you follow that pointer and you actually examine in your experience to just simply be curious about what is the nature of what we are here, you immediately come face to face with this obvious, undeniable fact of your true nature, and it is already, having all of those characteristics that we might have been searching for, So that can allow us to then appreciate some of these pointers, but always, knowing that the pointer is not what it is. But in seeing that distinction, you can appreciate, the pointers, you can enjoy the pointers, and you can, be in a meeting like this and hear this being pointed to and following the pointers, but simultaneously actually directly recognizing as it's being discussed that reality of who you are And the beauty of it is it starts right now in our direct experience, if we simply care to recognize what's being pointed to. And this is something that people, I think, miss, is that what you find is that we're not really talking about an attainment. It's not a particular experience. It's not a particular moment. It's not a shift. It's not a penny dropping. Nothing particularly needs to happen, which is, I think, often in spirituality, we often kind of subtly pick up that kind of idea that when's it going to happen? When I'm going to be there, and then you know somebody got it and somebody didn't get it, and you're kind of just subtly, the mind is kind of projecting into the future, imagining that there's something that's going to happen to me, and then this will be the case. And it turns out to be, which is a wonderful understanding, is that that's not the case actually. And even some of the most kind of rarefied, absolute types of teachings that you hear also turn out to be a little bit too complicated. So like we often hear awakening, and then it seems like, you know, so-and-so got something at a certain time. And so that would lead us to feel like, you know, maybe that could happen to me or something like that. But that's all conceptual. That's all in the imaginary, you know, kind of conceptual picture in the mind. Because if you actually look in direct experience, that awake, conscious, aware presence is actually already functioning. It's already completely clear and evident. So there we were waiting for awakening, or waiting for the shift or something to happen, not actually noticing that the awakeness or the awareness or that reality was actually there with even out needing the shift or the awakening. And in seeing it like this, the whole structure of spirituality and concepts kind of just glides out of the picture, because you realize you don't need anything to be what you already are, and all of those natural qualities are given by default in what's already present. So this is the kind of thing that Bob pointed out to me, and he shares about, and I was able to listen, you know, to what he was saying, and then just simply check it out and find the simplicity of the truth of that kind of the meaning of those pointers. But at no time was there some, you know, exotic awakening or shift or moment or something like that, because it's too complicated, you know. So then those age-old pointers about you are that, and your mind is the Buddha, and this is who we are, and then we recognize that, well, this is what they were trying to say, that, you know, that you already are the truth of what you are, that you are that. And at that point, the need for the pointers or to, you know, to understand what it is and where is it and all that whole thing is no longer necessary for who we are, because there's that direct recognition for ourselves of the truth of what we are. And it's a simple appreciation and recognizing of something that, as was pointed out to me once, that one of the keys to it is that it's so incredibly simple. It's so totally basic, and in a way so clear, so obvious, that it's often we've just stepped over and missed the essence of it. So you'll hear a lot of these pointers today, and if you really kind of follow what's being said, it's pointing back again and again and again and again in various different ways to that same basic, you know, message. And you don't need a lot of pointers or a lot of meetings or a lot of time or a lot of, you know, chewing over it like that, because all of that is still missing the simplicity of it. You know, is it just one meeting like this, or a discussion, or heart-to-heart talk, or hearing one real direct pointer that resonates can in itself be quite sufficient, you know, quite enough for us to simply turn and notice that.
Thanks, John. What you heard there was one of the most succinct and important philosophical expressions of what lies at the heart of this method. It's the notion that the actual thing that you're looking for is not an object. So the mind can never find it. That's a very, very important thing to realize and come to grips with over the course of your practice this session. This is not something that your mind will ever know. Now, it's not that the mind can't analyze it or describe it. Obviously, we've done that for years with our research. But in terms of the actual experience of it itself, that is not something that can be objectified. It's not something that can be an object of awareness, if you will. All you can do is sort of try to point in the direction of it. And of course, what we've been doing in this program is practices that come from many different angles, hoping that one or more of them will cause your brain to have a direct experience of this fundamental form of well-being. For this session, the method involves drilling down using direct and highly logical questions. In the next video clip, you're going to see a short example of what this looks like. I wanted you to have an example to follow, so let's go ahead and watch that, and then we'll come back for some final comments and instruction after it. I want to provide a demonstration of the type of dyadic inquiry that's possible. So we've already talked about how to do a direct inquiry method just with yourself, but part of your assignment for this week is to also do it with at least a couple of other people. So I want you to be able to see what that looks like so that you'll have some understanding of what you're supposed to actually do and replicate and whatnot. So we're going to go ahead and do it in this section with Nicole Bradford, who's of course the administrator of this course. What I'm going to simply do is begin by asking you a simple question, and you're going to provide an answer to that, just really, as honest an answer as you can and as open an answer as you can. And then we're just going to sort of continue a back and forth process of me continuing to ask you questions and you continuing to answer the questions. Does that make sense? All right, so my opening question for you is, there's a number of different ways that we can wind our way into this question. So I'm just going to ask it in a number of different ways, and you can respond in whatever way you'd like. The opening question really is, who does it feel like you are? Who are you, or what does it feel like you are?
It feels like I'm Nicole.
So who's Nicole? What or who is Nicole? How would you describe your sense of self as Nicole?
Nicole is a collection of stories over time.
So Nicole is a collection of stories over time. If those stories were to fall away, does Nicole disappear?
No, only the constraints on Nicole.
Only the what?
Only the constraints on Nicole.
So then Nicole probably isn't a collection of stories, right? If the stories can fall away and Nicole's still there, but with less constraints.
Yes.
So, who or what is Nicole?
Nicole is this being that's experiencing life.
How would you describe that being?
Awesome.
So if I were to take away the awesomeness, would there no longer be a Nicole?
It would be something, but it doesn't need to have a name.
So what would be left without the awesomeness?
And A being experiencing sense data directly.
A being experiencing sense data directly.
Yes.
So sense data implies that that Nicole is bound to a body that has senses. Is that accurate?
No, but that's just how Nicole experiences life. Through feeling, hearing, seeing, touching, mental phenomena.
So is Nicole that sense data?
No.
Then what's Nicole?
Something else.
What would it be? What's the something else?
A soul? I don't know what the right word is for it. I don't know if there is a word for it.
So tell me about what a soul is to you.
The essence?
The essence of?
Yes, an essence inside of us. Or not even inside of us, but it's an essence. And it really collect, we're born, the essence is there, we get a name, we collect sense data, then we get a narrator, we create stories around it, then we become a collection of our stories in our mind until we start to unwind that. And then we lose the stories. The name only becomes convenient so people can get in touch, so people can talk to us, and we know which essence they're talking to. We start to experience our sense data directly without the overlay of thought, and then it's to essence, and I don't know what's on the other side of that yet.
Well, let's see if we can find out. So all of that sounds like a pretty elaborate story. What I'm asking for here is actually things that you can describe firsthand, right? So if it's possible to describe a soul and the qualities of the soul, and if you're currently experiencing the soul and you're able to sort of, offer up what the sense of self is, if Nicole is a soul, and that's not just a concept. The idea of being a soul isn't just an idea, it should be an experience. And so what I'm asking for is really, what's the experience? So what we're trying to do is really wind down into what is the experience of who you really are.
Do you mean what is the moment by moment experience?
Well, what does that experience, what is actually experiencing that experience? I mean, I don't think that you would say your sense of self is green smoothie or whatever the experience in the moment is, or this exchange. So what is actually, what is actually you? What is actually, even just experiencing that to take it down a level?
Do you mean that, are you asking for paired group awareness?
Am I asking for shared group awareness?
Paired, data group awareness? Is that what this is?
No. I'm just simply trying to help you get down to understand your who you really are, right? Because right now, when I ask you who you are or what you are, it seems like you're offering up a lot of concepts about it. But I'm asking really I'm really trying to just help you drill down into a, you know, into really trying to find who you really are or what you really are. So the last thing that you offered up was a soul. And I just said, you know, well, if it's a soul, then you should, what are the properties of the soul? You know, describe the experience of the soul. The soul sounds kind of conceptual. It sounds like something we all think we probably might have or should have, depending upon our religious background or whatever. What I want is the actual experience of you. What is your sense of self in this moment? You're using the name Nicole, which is fine. Who are you? What are you at root in this moment? Experientially. Not
Alive.
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 So what is alive to you?
Breathing. Feeling. Seeing.
So who you are at your most fundamental level, you think is related to the sort of autonomic physiological processes of the body?
When you ask me how I experience something and what the experience is of it.
I'm not asking you for your experience. I'm asking you basically for what I'm asking you for how, if there is an experience, perhaps it's how you experience your sense of self, essentially, your deepest sense of self. I don't think your deepest sense of self is sense data, because I'm pretty sure that you would agree that there's all kinds of things that I can do to your brain with drugs or electromagnetic radiation or whatever that cut off almost, one by one all of your sense data. But I don't think that you would say that you no longer exist if I cut off all of the sense data. You can stop breathing for a little while, but I don't think that you would say that you stopped existing.
How do you describe the indescribable?
I don't know. Try.
I don't know how to do that. Because there is something at the center of all of that. There's a being at the center. I only use the word soul because it's a convenient term. But I can't really put a word to what it is.
Try a little bit for me. Would you say that that being at your center is what you experience as predominantly you in every moment?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, earlier when I asked you to describe you, you didn't start off with this beingness or whatever you want to call it at your center. You wound your way down through a whole bunch of other things. And so that suggests to me that if there is this beingness at your center, it wasn't, it's not the thing, apparently, at least when we first started this conversation, it's not the thing that you were most identified with as you, right? You didn't open the conversation by saying, well, there's this ineffable thing at the middle of me. That's really as close as I can get to describing me and my sense of self and who Nicole is. Is that accurate?
That sounds pretty good. That's what I meant.
So you are in your current answer to the question is that that there's something in your center, that there's a beingness in your center that can't really be talked about or described. And that's who you are.
It's that words can't really capture what it feels like. Like if I sort of sense into what's up underneath, what's taking in the sense data, like what's up underneath there, taking that in. It's playful. Excited. Curious. Incredibly curious. Loving. Happy. Confident. Or that's the wrong word. The right word is certain. Like a certainty. Security, a safety. A sense of safety. Up underneath everything else.
And if you were to take all of those away, all of those labels and descriptions and the underlying feelings that they're meant to represent, not the labels, but the underlying sense of them, would you still exist?
Yes.
So then it loops me back around to my question of who are you? What are you?
A seed.
A what?
A seed.
That sounds fairly conceptual.
I don't know how to use words to get to it. I'm not going to give a right answer. It's like as long as I'm using my mouth.
If you were to, same question basically, if you were to take that seed, whatever that sense is that you're feeling, if you were to take that seed away, would you still exist?
Is the question then, do I exist? Do I actually exist?
No, that's not the question. I'm talking to you. You exist.
Well, certainly something would exist then. Something exists. I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't know what it is without words. I can feel what it is. But every time I describe it, I get told it's conceptual.
So that thing you feel at the base, if that goes away, do you feel that your existence goes away?
Yes. Yes. It never goes away. Whatever it is.
So this is very important. I want you to try right now, as best you can, to make that go away. And take as much time as you need.
How can you be not there and there at the same time?
I don't know. Did you just experience that? Or is that just a question?
Well, so I reached into the space that we learned how to go to with Headless Way, that sort of awareness when you do this and you take it behind and then suddenly there's like a cavern with no end of awareness. And so I reached into that and into it and into it and into it, looking for a thing. And there's actually not a thing there, it's all of it. So it's like you're there and not there. But there's something doing the reaching into the thing that is never ends. So that's why I asked you to be there and not there.
It's kind of the only thing that you can only really answer that with experience, right? You just sort of have experience of it. How would you answer my question now? Who or what are you? Who and or what are you? What is your sense of that?
I am nothing with no end.
Pardon? You're
I'm
nothing.
nothing with no end. That endless cavern of awareness.
And it feels like to you that if that endless cavern of awareness went away, that you would no longer exist?
I don't know. I don't know what's out of it.
Give it a try. See if you can make it go away.
I only really know two states of being so far. One being contained by my skin suit, and the other one, this sort of new cavern of awareness. So when I try to make the cavern go away, I'm back in the skin suit.
So you're experiencing as kind of a flip-flop type situation.
I guess it's a flip-flop, but if there's a third way of being, which would be not the skin suit, not the cavern of awareness, or the endlessness of awareness, and then there's something else that happens when you get rid of awareness. I don't know how to get there.
See if when you go into the cavern of awareness, see if you can try to experience what it is that's actually experiencing the cavern of awareness.
Okay. That would be because when I went into it, before, like I said, there's the cavern and then there's something reaching into the cavern. Like sensing into it. But both were me.
Okay, then what you're basically trying to do is get to the point where you are, so if you have the cavern of awareness and you're able to describe it, objectify it, it's an experience that you can have, then really that suggests to me that something is experiencing it, right? And then if you're able to describe something probing it, you're also, that's also objectified for you at this point, right? And so something is also experiencing even that probing. So the question for you at this point, I think, is, what is it that is experiencing these things? Something is containing, or something is experiencing either that cavern of awareness or the thing that's probing it, or whatever. So see if you can figure out what it is that's experiencing that, if you will.
So what I tried to do was I tried to see both the awareness and the sensing into awareness. And so I tried to, like if it were like, let's just say it was this contained in here, then I tried to come out here and look back to see them both. But then this just kept getting bigger. I wasn't able to find the vantage point to look back at it and see it.
Now, is this awareness space that we're talking about, is this to you the same as that core beingness deep inside you that you were referring to earlier?
It's kind of like how they say, sorry, somebody came up on my screen. It's kind of like how they say that a drop of water isn't the ocean, but the components of the ocean are in every drop of water. It's like that. So is it the same? No. Is it made up of the same? Yes.
So, saying yes. So then, is that a way of saying that that center that you were talking about is sort of the larger ocean that everything is made up of?
Yes, it's kind of like so this being that's experiencing the sense data here is a component of that larger awareness.
Of the larger awareness. But I'm talking about that center versus the larger awareness. So the
center would be a piece of the larger awareness.
Okay, so the center. So what we've identified is that center that you thought was you before. We've kind of moved beyond that.
Yeah, it's sort of like the center's like the thumb of your body. It's still or that's not a good analogy. It's like it's the piece of you that's experiencing life, in this sort of physical way, but its origin is the ocean.
So if that center were to go away, if that center that you're feeling would go away, you would still exist, basically.
Yes, I would be the ocean. But because the drop of water and the ocean are made of the same thing, you can be in the drop and feel the ocean.
Okay, so you're talking about that sense of that sort of awareness space. And we were talking about something that was probing it. So if that probe goes away, it still exists.
Yes.
Okay, so the fundamental piece, as it's experienced right now, is really sort of this ocean of awareness or awareness space.
Yes.
Okay. So one more time, maybe not just one more time, but at least one more time, go back into that awareness space. Now, the last time, you were trying to get to what was experiencing it by asking yourself what might be outside of it. However, we don't necessarily have to experience things from outside. It's possible that what's experiencing that awareness space is something even more fundamental in that space, or something interpenetrating, with the awareness that's even more so. I mean, it might be in the space, basically, instead of, you might not have been easy to see what that is from the, what is actually aware of that awareness from the outside of it, because maybe it's not outside of it. So, one more time, why don't we have you go back into that awareness? And what you're really looking for is an answer to the question of, what is it that's an experience, right? And I think probably through all of these layers and stuff, you've pretty well come to the conclusion that you're not an experience. And yet even that sense of awareness really is an experience. So if you're not an experience per se, then something that is you, whatever it is that you are, at your deepest essence, something that is you is sort of allowing that experience, or having that experience, or facilitating that experience of awareness, for instance. So just take however long you want, basically, and see if you can go down and ask yourself, what is it that is actually experiencing this awareness? What is it that's producing this experience in the first place? Any experience. In this case, it's a very deep experience of awareness that feels like it's underlying all other experience, but it's still an experience. So see if you can see what it is that is able to have an experience of that awareness.
Something and nothing? I don't know. I never got a good answer. Or like a solid answer. It's like asking a question in a cave. Hello? 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 And then you just hear, hello, 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 hello.
Okay, for sake of this video, that's where we're going to stop it, just so it doesn't get too crazy long for the instruction.
Okay. For the sake of the length of this session, that's where we're going to stop viewing this video. As you can tell, on one level, it's a very mental process. You're engaging the mind and you're going mind to mind with each other when it's two people like this. And as a result of that, there are probably going to be periods of frustration, anger may arise, and other types of experiences like that. You just kind of have to push through those, because ultimately you're asking a question that really can't be answered in the mind. But you're asking it of the mind, and you're asking the mind to answer it anyway. So you continue to unravel and dig deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And if you're successful, eventually a moment is reached that transcends and goes beyond the mind. But up to that point, it's a very mental back and forth process. If you're trying to get the mind to realize an object, that's easy. It does that all the time. But when you're trying to get the mind to realize something it can never make into an object and operate on as an object, of course, that may bring up some frustration as you push and push and push on it, basically forcing it to do what seems like an impossible task. So that's all a natural part of this process, and it's perfectly fine. Another thing I wanted to point out about the video is that there were points when I accelerated things a bit further and faster than I would in a normal session. I would not do this if I wasn't keeping an eye on the clock and trying to keep it shortened up for us here instructionally. For example, there was a point in which I said, well, X is true, so Y is also true, and therefore Z must be true. I would never have shortcutted that in an actual session. It's important to lead people step by step, systematically. You, as the facilitator, don't want to take any leaps. You don't want to lead the person. You don't want to draw conclusions for them. In the first Finder's Course pilot experiment, I think we did this process for something like 3 hours live with one of the participants who volunteered before she finally transitioned to fundamental well-being. The thing that takes so long with this process is that you don't want to draw conclusions for the other person. You have to lead the other person step by step, often slowly and meticulously, to their own conclusions, to their own aha moments. Okay, let's get to the actual practices for this session. This session has 3 different things that I'd like you to do with this core method. First, as you go throughout your day, wherever you find yourself, and whenever you're able to notice that there is a thought in your head that is about I or me, I want you to question who that I and who that me is. Literally ask yourself, who is that? Who's that I? Who is I? Who am I? What is this I? Who is this I? And so on. There's all sorts of different ways that you can ask this. Now, obviously, you're not going to ask all of those questions that I just said, but it can be very useful to try different variations as you're playing around with this. One may be far more powerful than another. And, as you know, everyone is unique. So just a simple change in a question can make a huge impact in terms of the effectiveness of this technique. For most people, a good place to start is simply by questioning, who is this I that is referring to itself? So that's a very, very powerful question to ask, right? If you're just going through your day and an I thought occurs to you, you say to yourself, wait a minute, who is this I that's referring to itself? As with everything, this session, this is a real question. You're looking to find an answer to that question. Who is this I? You want to find an answer to it. It's not a hypothetical question. It's not a question that you just sort of throw out there and then forget about and move on from. Now, I get it. The reality is that you may find yourself during this, in a very busy period of your day or whatever else. You don't have to spend a lot of time digging into it, but you should absolutely dig in. The reason for this is actually very simple. You want to keep your brain engaged on this question, and this will ensure that your brain keeps working on it, even if it's working on it in the background. We've all had experiences where we were working on a difficult problem that we just couldn't figure out. And then we gave up for a while, and presto, the answer just pops into our heads at some point later on, usually at a moment that has absolutely nothing to do with the problem under consideration. What's happening here is that you let your brain know that this is an important problem for you. And a portion of the vast quantity of the unconscious processes in your brain kept working on it until it was solved. You can do the exact same thing with the questions for this session. And you absolutely should. By keeping who am I and what am I type questions in mind as much as possible throughout this session, you're letting your brain know that this is an important problem for you, one you want solved. An easy way to keep these background processes hard at work for you is to just constantly be interrupting your thought patterns throughout the course of the day. Anytime you think to yourself, I. For example, if you think to yourself, I really need to do this, stop and say, wait a minute, who is that I? And really ask yourself, really try to dig in and drill down. Who is that I? What is that I? Again, it doesn't have to be something that you do for very long. Just try to put some focus on it and then move on with your day. The second way that I'd like you to use this exercise during this session is as a daily solo practice, a dedicated practice. What I'd like you to do is take an hour or more and do this questioning process on your own. So start by simply asking yourself, who am I? Or what am I? Just like we did a moment ago. And just keep digging in from there. Dig as far down as you can. Really, really go for it. It's okay if frustration or other so-called negative feelings come up. Just push past them and keep asking. Keep reaching for a further answer than the one you currently have. I don't care what it is, whatever answer you currently have, just keep pushing. You'll know when this process has worked for you, right? Because this process is about getting to fundamental well-being, not getting some answer from your mind to these questions. When you think that you've reached the end, give yourself 6 or 7 minutes of further digging, really push, and if you truly can't get any further than your current answer, then at that point, you should have reached, if it's true, the deepest level within you that you can currently perceive and experience yourself to be. That's because when you first ask the question, you'll most likely be answering it intellectually. I'm a programmer, right? Obviously, if you're not a programmer, you still exist. So that's not the deepest question, right? And therefore, really, you can't last that long at those surfacey levels. Before long, when you ask it, you'll have to actually look deeper and deeper and deeper inside for an answer. And as you increasingly do this, you'll sink deeper and deeper within. And by the end of the exercise, wherever you get to will most likely be the deepest level of awareness that you can currently reach. So at that point, I want you to take the remaining time for your session, and, certainly you should take, even more time if you can. And I want you to just sink into it, sink into that experience. That's the deepest place you've gotten to so far. Sink into it, deepen into it. What does it feel like, right? It's a great way to wind your way down to as deep an experience of fundamental well-being as you currently have, or as close to it as you can get if you're not quite there yet. As we've talked about, one of the most powerful things we can do is just kind of marinate. Just sink into and marinate in as deep a place as we can currently get to. Sink in and allow the neural connections that are responsible for generating that experience to strengthen so that they become the dominant and lasting ones versus ones that are related to your traditional narrative sense of self. It's very common for people to experience moments during the questioning process where they go deeper and deeper in the direction of or into fundamental well-being. However, this is also something that can happen during the sinking in process. It's possible that during this part of the exercise, you'll deepen even further just from that sinking in. At this point, you want to return to the iterative questioning process because now you've got a new answer. You're in a new place. You want to use that. You might even find yourself cycling back and forth several times during a single session between asking questions, thinking that you've gotten to the deepest place, sinking in, and then as a result of the sinking in process, deepening even further, and so on, and then going back and saying, okay, I've got a new answer to the question of who am I? Is that really my final answer? And so on and so forth, right? It's a very, very powerful process. Of course, as we always say, if this does not happen to you, no big deal. Some of these methods are right for some people, and some of these methods are right for others. You can always be confident that the right ones are happening for you. It doesn't matter what's happening for others. The third way to do this method, this session, is dyadically, as you saw in the sample video. So, for this, you'll need to pair up with other members of your group, and specifically each time with just one other member of your group. It's a good idea for you to try to do this as many different times as you can with as many of your different group members as you can during this session. Other people are going to help you dig into yourself in ways that you cannot possibly do alone. And of course, different people will ask you different questions. One of the benefits of multiple group members is that you will cover much more psychological ground using this process than is otherwise possible on your own. One limit with only doing it on your own is that you can't see beyond your own biases. There's just no way for you to really see beyond your own biases or your own perspectives, your own beliefs, and so on. Other people, however, have a totally different perspective, different beliefs, different ideologies, and so on. Their role is to bring that other perspective to this process, to take your best guess at whatever point you're at in the process and try to help you unravel what you are not seeing so that you can go even deeper. And of course, it goes without saying that your role is to do the same for them. After doing the practice with your fellow group members, you may find that you prefer one or more of them. It's just like a natural resonance. Something about their beliefs or their ideologies or the way they view things, it's just more helpful for you in this process. Basically, they're just kind of better aligned for helping you with this process than other of your small group members. It's perfectly fine to communicate that to them and to ask these individuals for additional sessions if they have the time to do it. You don't have to equally balance your time across sessions with, every member of your group just to be fair or for some sort of political reason or something like that. You're here for effectiveness. Initially, you want to try to experience a session with as many of your group members as you possibly can, but if you discover a preference for one or more of them, definitely go in that direction if that person has the time or people have the time to help you. It's a good idea to leave as much time as you can for these dyadic sessions. There will always be time restrictions, but remember that the session used as a sample in the first Finder's Course experiment was done live by me, and it took something like 3 hours. So try to allocate at least a half an hour when you're doing it with your fellow group members, or an hour is certainly better, and it's even better if you can just try to leave it open-ended. One way to think about this is that the brain processes that are involved in this want to survive, just like cells in other parts of your body want to survive. This is a process that is designed to shift away from some brain processes and activate other ones. Needless to say, there's going to be resistance from the current brain processes to having that happen, right? The current brain processes that you're looking to shift away from don't want to be shifted away from. If you tell them, you know what? You've really only got to worry about this for the next 30 minutes, and then we're going to stop this process. It can kind of be similar to telling insurgents in a war zone, listen, our troops are only going to be here for about another month or so. What happens in that case, right? They just shift their strategy to waiting it out. Well, that's what your brain processors are going to do too. So be very, very careful with this. Conversely, if the commanders in that war zone say, you know what, we're going to stay here for as long as we need to, and we're going to expend whatever resources we have to in order to win this war. It puts the insurgents in a very different position. Just keep this in mind when having a fixed amount of time versus an open-ended, do everything necessary type of attitude for this method. I'm sure in the first Finder's Course, as the hours ticked by, the brain processes and our volunteer participant got the hint that we weren't going to stop until this process came to a successful completion. The best option when scheduling dyadic sessions is not to switch back and forth in the same session. So it's best, not to sort of switch roles, but rather to have one person be scheduled to be the questioner, the person who's saying, okay, who are you? right? And one person who's scheduled to be the person that answers those questions, which we can call the answerer. It's also important to allow time for sinking in at the appropriate moment, just as in the solo version of the exercise. And so the questioner doesn't always have to push and push and push and push. There can be moments where sinking in is appropriate. You've just kind of got to have a feel for that, or get a feel for that. When you think you've truly reached the end of the progress that can be made, you don't have to exchange, and in other words, you're getting ready to end the session. You don't have to exchange any niceties. You don't have to talk for a while after it or anything like that. Frankly, in this case, it's better to just let the answerer disconnect and continue to sink in, because the answer at this point has had a very intense process. And if that person reaches new depths by the end of this dyadic process, she or he can convert the process to a solo version of the exercise. The questioner is able to sort of go on with his or her day, and the answerer can just keep going. All right, that's it for this session's new instruction. Again, this is one of the most powerful methods out there. It has helped a huge number of people to successfully transition to fundamental well-being. So take it very seriously. Enjoy, and I'll see you next time.